Thank you so much for being here and joining me on the Anxiety Reset podcast. It is truly an honor to have you here. If there was one thing that you wish more women knew, because this is an audience of women predominantly, but you can say it as more people knew. I know you have a big message on your heart. What is it that you want people to know?
Well, I know I wish that I had known that pain has a purpose in our lives and that it's there to help us grow. And I think if I had known that fear would not have directed so many of my decisions.
Oh, such a beautiful place for us to begin. Can you share a little about how you came to know such pain and gain such wisdom from it, taking us back to obviously the events that completely shaped so much of your life, going back to what occurred at Sandy Hook. There's a moment you describe of what it was like the last morning that you were with your son. Are you happy to share a little bit about those moments and just take us back to, I suppose, the foundation of everything that has inspired your work?
Absolutely. So that last day was like every other day, getting two boys ready for school as a single mom, and then heading off to my own work. Always running a little late. I walked Jesse out to meet his dad at the end of the driveway that morning, early, and it's Connecticut, so it was December 14th. There was frost on the side of the car. I gave him a hug goodbye, and I noticed behind him that he had written, "I love you," and drawn hearts in all of my windows while I was talking to his dad. And so knowing that that was one of life's moments, I said, wait right here, don't go anywhere. I'm going to run in, get my phone so I can get a picture. And I literally took the last picture of Jesse as he was driving to school that morning, as well as the message that he left me on the car, which was, "I love you." It was really, really beautiful. In fact, I say that the best way to live your life with the fewest regrets is to be present with the ones that you love. And I really tried to do that. And of course, I'm so happy that I did. I mean, this was really sort of a little bit before the time when we're all addicted to screens. I mean, even though I had a cell phone, we did a lot of playing games and really just being with one another. And that is something that, you cherish for a lifetime, and you really don't know how long you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just that moment really was that solidifier for you of how important it is to be present, to capture those little moments. And of course, then the events that followed. I mean, Scarlett, do you recall the exact moment of hearing the news of what had occurred?
I do. I had driven to work that morning, and there was one of my friends that worked where I worked was at home. And so she was watching the news, and she instant messaged me. And, the interesting thing is those kinds of things don't happen to people like me. There are people on the news, and then they're just regular people like me. So, there had been a shooting in Sandy Hook. That was what was reported initially. And then people started coming up to my desk and saying, "Hey, it's at a school." And I had two boys in two different schools. One was in the middle school and one was in the elementary school. Then somebody came up and said it was at Sandy Hook Elementary School. So I'm driving back home. It was a 45-minute commute that I had. And I had just driven to work and getting, sort of wild reports of a teacher being shot in the foot. And in my mind, I thought, well, that maybe it's a domestic dispute. And the kids are going to be really scared. And so I need to get there. All the kids were, they had just had an active shooter drill 3 weeks before at the school. So they had practiced evacuations and going out to the firehouse, which was at the end of the cul-de-sac where the school was. So I knew where to go. And, but I wasn't really that worried, honestly. I just didn't think that it didn't even occur to me that it was a school shooting, actually. I thought it was just, not that it's just, but I thought maybe it was a targeted shooting. And then that's awful enough. But when I got there, I had to park about a quarter of a mile away. There was cars lining the streets and first responders. The military was there. There were helicopters flying overhead. It was absolute mayhem. Parents running around, frightened, looking for their children. I'm watching these reunifications, these happy, relieved reunifications happening all around me, and I'm still looking for my son. Somebody said, "Oh, I think Jesse went over to the house to the left of the firehouse." So I ran over there, knocked on the door, and somebody answered and said, yeah, he was here, but he ran over to the daycare on the other side. So I'm on with his dad saying, "Go check the daycare." Okay, he's not here, so go check the hospitals. So his dad actually went and checked the hospitals. It was really, really frightening. Nobody was saying anything. There were people that had come out of the school. Nobody was saying anything. And we didn't really get notification until much later that afternoon. It took quite a while to identify all the bodies, evidently, and they didn't want to tell parents that their children were deceased until they were sure. But it was a horrendous day.
How does a mother metabolize such horrendous information? Just coming to terms with, this is my reality now.
That day was a long day. And unfortunately, my son, who was in middle school and in lockdown, had texted me and said, "Mom, can I come wait with you at the firehouse?" He was following this. And my mom lives across town. So she and my stepfather actually picked him up and brought him to the firehouse. So here I am with my 12-year-old son, who has already experienced trauma. We both had, on bringing him into the worst day of our lives. And it changed the dynamic for me, because as a single mom, I am the leader of the family, and JT was looking to me, and I knew that. And so I was very aware of how I was thoughtfully responding in the moment. Not that I wasn't terrified and starting to grieve when it looked like Jesse wasn't coming back, but I also knew that in the moment I was teaching my 12-year-old son how he could and would be moving through this, as well as pain for the rest of his life. I think when something like that happens, and I liken it to having the rug of life pulled out from underneath you, you go into shock. And so there was this beautiful, I'll say, shock that I was in. I just kind of like an automatic autopilot. I knew that, I had to keep my family safe, and I had to keep them calm. But I will tell you, and it wasn't really real. It's like,
yeah,
it takes a while for your mind to wrap itself around the totality of having a young child murdered in their first grade classroom. I remember that day. I'm relatively calm because I am trying to be calm for my older son. And this gives you kind of a time frame. My younger brother lived in Boston, and it takes about 3.5 hours to drive to Newtown. But we had just found out the information that Jesse had been murdered, We were heading inside to the firehouse, waiting for an unmarked van to come around and take us home. And because the media was out in front, and I saw my mom walk over to my little brother across the parking lot and tell him the news. And watching his reaction, his doubling over, I remember thinking in my mind, oh my God, this is real. This is really happening. It was devastating.
Scarlett, in the weeks and months that followed from that moment, people often describe in intense grief and pain as, always being there on some level. I'm wondering, as you reflect back on that initial pain now and
Mm-hmm.
here where we are many years later,
Mm-hmm.
has that pain shifted for you, or can it still bring you right back to that moment?
Mm. That's a great question. And I remember within the first few days, they had some trauma experts had brought in a woman who had lost their son 20 years prior. And she was there to talk to me. And at this point, I think I'm going to die from the pain. That's how great it was. Not hurt myself, but just dissolve.
Mm.
And she starts telling me about what my life is going to be like in 20 years. And like you said, the pain is going to be the exact same as it is now. And you're always going to feel this. It's always going to be with you. And I remember thinking, I can't always feel this pain or I will die. And so that is not acceptable. I cannot have a future where I continue to feel this level of pain. I had this word in my mind, and it was joy. It was really strange because that's where I'd come from with my two boys. And so this word was kind of moving around in the back of my head, even within the first few days. And, I listened to her and I thought, I don't want that. I can't have that. I want joy. I want to get back to joy. And so I really think this whole Choose Love movement is literally my roadmap that no one else gave me back to joy. But with that being said, I understand a little bit now more of what she was talking about because um, it is it's never easy. It's always poignant. I think a good word would be to describe it. I talk about it a lot, and I don't often get very emotionally charged, but I can. I never really know when it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, when you have when you lose a child, I feel like it is almost like an appendage. It's like losing an arm, and I liken it to phantom pain because that child is supposed to be with you, was literally born a part of you, and now that they're no longer here, it's always sort of like a missing link. And I've really tried to connect with Jesse spiritually because I believe that the spirit lives on. And I've actually had proof of that, which has really helped in my grieving process. And so I talk to him all the time. And I feel like, in this Choose Love movement that I started, that he really started with a chalkboard message that he left. I feel like he helps me because I'm not sure that I would have been able to get to where I am today without supernatural help.
Oh, I think that's so healthy and really speaks to a deeper connection that many of us have lost in many ways because we think that the world is just what we can see, taste, smell, touch, and yet there are so many experiences that occur if we are open enough to have them. I'm wondering, oh, there's so many questions I have for you, Scarlett. The first one is you have to tell us what you mean by proof. What was that
Yeah.
like for you and this chalkboard message?
Oh, there's so many stories. I wrote a book about it called Nurturing Healing Love. But let me tell you about the chalkboard message because that's one of the bigger ones. And here I am 13 years later, continuing to spread that chalkboard message. A few days after the tragedy, I had to go pick out Jesse's clothes for him to wear in the casket. Um, just unimaginable task. I hadn't been home yet because my mom lived across town, and I just couldn't imagine walking in my little farmhouse that I shared with my two boys, walking by Jesse's boots. And I just pictured his PJs that he would have kicked off that morning, a toothbrush by the bathroom sink, and, just signs of life. And it was, it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And when I went home, I I just kind of put blinders on so I wouldn't see anything. I went straight to Jesse's bedroom, to his dresser drawers. I picked out clothes that were very warm because it was winter and we were burying him in the ground. Turtleneck, sweater, flannel lined pants, his favorite boots. And so I have these in my arms and I'm walking out and I pass the kitchen, and the first thing you see in the kitchen is this spray painted side of our oven, which was our chalkboard. And we didn't use it very often, but there was a message written on it, right low where a 6-year-old would be standing. And it said, nurturing, healing, love, phonetically spelled, because he was in first grade and just learning to write. And I was floored, because of course I'd been thinking, how could something like this happen? And I'd been thinking about the shooter and the fact that he was a former student at the same school that he had gone to first grade, in those classrooms, and what could have happened to a person to turn them into a mass murderer of little children. And that had been roiling around in my brain. And it was a question that I don't think that I had answered until I saw that chalkboard message. And I realized that it was lack of nurturing, healing love. It was so incredibly simple, the solution, and written by a 6-year-old boy. Now, those 3 words are not something that Jesse would say. They're not in the vernacular of a 6-year-old just learning to write. In fact, the words were phonetically spelled. But the power of those words literally changed me when I saw them. And I've been spending the last 13 years spreading that message of nurturing, healing love, and the need for us to really focus on the root cause of so much of the dis-ease that we see in society, in our kids, in ourselves, in our streets. And that is pain, physical, mental, and emotional. And the bottom line is, and this is how I started off the podcast, and the first question that you asked me, what did I wish that people knew? I wish that people knew that pain has a purpose, that they're going to feel it physically, mentally, and emotionally because we're human beings, and that's part of being human. But that it has a purpose. It's there to get us out of our comfort zone. It's there to teach us lessons. It's there to help us become more resilient, more wise, more capable. And I really, truly, honestly think that if people, kids, adults understood this, there would be less fear of painful events. And fear is what exacerbates pain and inhibits healing. And I think if there were less fear, there would be more healing.
Yes, and it's in often the resistance of pain or trying to avoid it that we create more problems as well.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. But when we have the courage, and I'm working on this formula that I devised from Jesse's example of courage. Jesse actually that day saved 9 of his classmates' lives before losing his own. He sacrificed his life, and when I think about that courage, that is the same capacity for courage that we all have. When you find out that your son, his brave action saved 9 of his classmates, it makes you stand a little taller as far as, how you're going to respond to this. I thought, my God, if Jesse could have done that, then I can take his message and I can share it, dedicate my life to keeping our kids safe and well. I really noticed that there was so much focus on problems. I mean, if you think about, we spend billions of dollars a year hardening schools. We wait till mental illness arises, and then we mostly medicate it. We have substance abuse, which is only just this year the overdose percentage reduced, but it's still a huge problem, and we treat the symptoms of it, and it all has the same root cause, and that's pain. So I thought, wow, wouldn't it be a good idea to create a program that schools can use to teach kids how to not only have the courage to face pain, but the understanding that that we're actually designed as human beings to grow through it. And it is a concept called post-traumatic growth. Probably your listeners have heard of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, but by far the majority of us experience post-traumatic growth. We literally learn and grow through pain. And so if we had this awareness, we'd have less fear. We'd be able to harvest the gifts from pain, and situations like Sandy Hook Elementary School would not happen.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And you mentioned that those words, nurturing healing love, as our remedy to this pain. I'm wondering for you, Scarlett, how do you understand those words? Because people can hear a phrase like, love heals all, and
Mm-hmm.
yet we may not have a concept of what that actually means in practical terms. What does it look
Mm-hmm.
like for you?
That's why I created this formula,
Mm.
because this formula is literally designed to return your locus of control, location of your personal power, back inside you, where you have the ability to create positive change for a better future. That's the definition of hope. The flip side of that is having a locus of control outside of you, and yes, it vacillates, but we know that it's outside of us because we blame other people for where we are now. We feel helpless. We can feel victimized. That can lead to hopelessness, and hopelessness is the single most consistent factor in suicide and violence. So it's really important that we bring that locus of control back inside of us, where we feel that we can handle any obstacle that comes our way, which, by the way, we can, because we ultimately do. But this formula helps, and it's courage. It's it's like the courage that Jesse showed, except it's the courage to be kind when people aren't being kind to you. It's the courage to face difficulty rather than, as you said, resist, avoid, or numb ourselves. And then I get into nurturing healing love. Nurturing means loving kindness and gratitude. And when you look at the research behind a regular practice of gratitude, I know it sounds so simple, but it is so incredibly powerful. It literally helps you to build resilience from the inside out. Gratitude can help you shift your lens of focus from negative to positive, because you can't think of two thoughts at once. So you can't have a negative thought and a grateful thought at once. You can't be in love or fear at once. So you get to choose with gratitude. And there's always something to be grateful for. In fact, I found JT and I had started a gratitude list right after Jesse died. So I had a little notebook, and I had lost it. I had forgotten about it until I found it maybe a year or so ago. And we were writing 3 things that we were grateful for, him and me, at night, and they had to be different every day. And it was so fascinating to go back and to see what we were grateful for in the worst time of our lives. Even then we had so much to be grateful for. So gratitude is really important because it also sets you up to be able to consider forgiveness. And healing literally is forgiveness. Forgiveness is the most important part of my healing journey. Georgie, I was saying right after the tragedy, I was so curious as to what could have happened to Adam Lanza when a lot of people were calling him evil and monster. I thought, but he's a human being, and he went to that school just like my kids and had similar experiences. What happened that cultivated him, because he wasn't born that way, into doing something evil and monstrous? And that curiosity led to me finding out some things about his life, like he was bullied and neglected, most likely abused. There are little stories that I heard about he and his mom making birthday invitations when he was in first grade at Sandy Hook Elementary School, making the invitations. He brings them in a backpack, passes them out. Nobody comes to his party. Or in 5th grade, when he wrote a handwritten book and then made copies and brought them to school of a book called The Book of Granny. And it's about a witch that comes to the school with a broomstick that opens into a semi-automatic weapon and murders children. Now he wrote this book, and it was taken. So they were aware of it, but he was never spoken to about it. Nobody ever actually sat down and said, why did you write this? What is going on in your head? Is everything going on? Is everything okay at home? That caring was lacking. And kids need to feel safe, seen, and celebrated. In fact, I have gone out and now spoken to more school shooters in my endeavor to really figure this out, because we haven't. And they all say the same thing. They say that they did not feel seen. And that was the same for Adam. And so, I saw how he had cried out for help, and nobody helped him. And so that empathy that I started to feel helped me to forgive. But forgiveness was the most important thing that I could do in my recovery to take my personal power back. Now we know that forgiveness through MRIs actually stops the pain channels in your brain. So it literally inoculates you against pain and gives you your authentic power back. Now we can feel powerful when we want to retaliate with revenge, but that is not true power, and we are not in control. But with forgiveness that comes from our prefrontal cortex, we are truly the highest and best version of ourselves. And it's the best way to live, because you let go of the pain. You can harvest the gifts from the pain. You learn, grow, and are strengthened, but then you let the pain go. And it's really important. But you see how the courage has to be first, because you have to have courage to be grateful when things aren't going their way. You have to have courage to forgive, especially when somebody doesn't care that they hurt you or doesn't know. And then there's compassion in action. And that's when you have the courage to kind of step outside of everything that's happened and share what you've learned with other people. I truly believe that that's one of the reasons, that's a purpose for our being on earth, is to learn from our pain. Everybody has pain, and it's not so much what happens to you, it's how you choose to thoughtfully respond and what you do with it. Because so many people are needing help to move through difficult times. And so when you can have the courage to share what you've learned, because you certainly learn through every painful event, you are refined by difficulty or you're defined by it. And part of the reason that I took this path was, yes, Jesse's chalkboard message, but also my 12-year-old son and my responsibility and my newfound responsibility of doing this for the world's children. Before this, I thought, well, it's my responsibility as a parent. I have 2 kids, and I'm just going to keep them clean and loved and safe and educated and play with them and all this, but I really didn't think too much about my responsibility as a community member and a world member. And now I realize, that we all have to be part of the solution. We can't, part of my message is like, you can't wait for other people to fix your problems. And when has that ever worked for you anyway? You can learn skills and tools that can help you do that. And this is our world. What kind of world do we want to leave our kids? Well, get up, put your phone down, and start doing things. Start practicing compassion in action and start doing things to help make a safer, more peaceful and loving world. It's possible. And the incredible thing, and my favorite thing about compassion in action, is that when you do that, when you offer nurturing, healing love out into the world, you get nurturing, healing, and love back. That's the beautiful thing. And that is choosing love.
Yes. And I just want to take us back to this moment because it's just so deeply profound, especially when we think about the wider scheme of the world, and pretty much all the problems of humanity come back to this lack of many of these pieces that you've mentioned: courage, gratitude, forgiveness, compassion. And you somehow managed, Scarlett, to forgive the man who murdered your son.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is something that, I mean, you ask any human who has not experienced that, and they would say, for the rest of your life, you're going to harbor that resentment, that rage, that desire for some kind of revenge, that helplessness, because what can you do? There is nothing that can be done.
Right.
And
yeah, and people do.
Yeah. And you chose a different
path. And I've seen it. I did. I chose a different path, and I was primed to choose a different path. I grew up Christian, so I knew that I was supposed to forgive so that I would be forgiven, but I didn't know how. And I really had to learn the steps of forgiveness. And this really is a roadmap of my own journey of healing and being able to model this for JT. It was first the courage, and literally I thought of my first grade son and understanding that we all have the capacity for the courage that Jesse showed. And courage is like a muscle. We have to practice it in order to strengthen it. And that means doing things that are outside of our comfort zone every day. It's not huge things. It's small things, but actually doing them. And then, as you know, JT and I practiced gratitude as well. And gratitude literally fortifies you from the inside out to better be able to consider forgiveness. And you remember the woman that came and said, I was going to feel this pain forever. She had not forgiven. She was telling me about thoughts of retribution, retaliation, and revenge. She was angry. And I thought, I don't want to be angry. And I looked around too at the reactions to the tragedy. They were very polarizing. At that point, you were either pro-gun or anti-gun, and everybody was pointing fingers and blaming, and there was a lot of anger, and there was a lot of anger, of course, towards Adam Lanza and his mom, who gave him the guns. And I understand that. But in my mind, I thought, if it was all their fault, and yes, they're both, Adam's mom gave him access to guns, that was a huge mistake, for which she paid for with 4 shots to the face before he left that day. You know what I mean? But big mistake. And then, of course, Adam is wholly responsible for what he did. However, if it was all their fault, all this, vitriol and rage was going towards them, but if it was all their fault, what happened, then it would never have happened before, and it had many times, and it would never happen again. But it's become a regular thing in America. We just know it's going to happen. It doesn't surprise us anymore, and sometimes it doesn't even make the news. So for me, I thought, and I had been through something similar as I learned about Nancy Lanza's life, Adam's mom, and she had a son with special needs, and she tried to get him help, and she did not get a whole lot of help coming back at her. And so, some people don't have the confidence. It's not an excuse, but he did not get the help that he needed. And so he literally is one of the ones that I don't even want to say fell through the cracks, because he was tested, he had needs that were known, and they were not met. And he suffered for a long time, his whole life, for it. And so I came about it in a very thoughtful way. I did not react. And I had that woman in my mind. I really thank her, because I knew what I didn't want. I do not want to model anger and hatred and revenge, which a lot of people were in Sandy Hook. I mean, you had moms getting together, some of the anti-gun moms, and they were giving the finger to changing their Facebook profile to giving the finger, to guns. And I was like, that is not the modeling that I want to have for my son. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life fighting against something. I want to be for something. And Jesse gave me what to be for, the most powerful element in the universe, and that's love. And that's worked out.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the background that you've had, because I was curious about that. Like the Christian values setting you up to even have, an awareness of the concepts of forgiveness and things like that. And yet, Scarlett, there would be many people who also have had a similar exposure and not be able to tap into that. So I'm curious about this part of you that seems to be able to rise to a higher level of consciousness about what's going on, rather than simply me versus you, everyone is good or they are bad. There seems to be this capacity that you've cultivated, or whether it was always inherent within you, to zoom out and look at the greater picture and context of whatever is occurring, to sort of rise beyond labels of simply evil or good.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I practice being present with my boys. I practice being present in my life. And I really think that mindfulness helped me not to just react. I did not like the reactions that I was seeing. And I was poignantly aware that my 12-year-old son was watching every move that I made, not just every word out of my mouth, but every gesticulation. His eyes were on me, and I had this word, joy, and I said, I want to get to it. I want to get back to it. We have a life. to live. I'm not going to rail against what happened. I mean, it happened. I'm not going to rail against reality. The reality is Jesse's murdered. That's done. I have to figure out, how am I going to cobble together? How am I going to create a roadmap for JT and I to move forward and have joy in our lives? We have, hopefully a lot of time left. And I did it mostly for JT, but, I also had, like I said, I have a strong faith. So at the firehouse, JT actually recently was reminding me that I was telling him, if Jesse's with Jesus, then he's already in paradise. We're going to have a harder time here, but we will get through this, and we will get through it together, and it's going to be okay. A lot comes through, Georgie, when you look at something from the rear view mirror standpoint, like after time has passed, and then you can look back. And I have to tell you that I see how God completely set me up to be able to respond in the way that I did. I mean, I'll just share 6 weeks before the tragedy, and I had a strong faith, but we didn't go to church, and the boys we were at my brother's house. They were acting up, and I just got really mad. And so we left early. And I remember, speaking of rear view mirror, looking at their little faces in the back seat, and I'm yelling on the way home, we are going to make changes. We are going to start going to church. You're going to go to Sunday school every week, and we are going to do this, and I have a great neighbor who I just love. And so we started going to her church, which is right around the corner, for 6 weeks before the tragedy. Now, if you think about that, when your child dies, and there are, by the way, 26 dead people, how do you get a church if you don't have a church home to have a funeral? Then all the funeral homes, they were all taken. And my church home was not in Newtown. It was right around the corner from my house, tucked away in Monroe. They had a honorary service for him. He died on a Friday. That Sunday, we went to church, and people in the congregation stood up, and they started telling stories of Jesse. And the Sunday school teacher said, last Sunday, I played a video of Jesus's life. And she said, can you imagine trying to get kindergarten or first graders to sit down and watch this? Nobody wanted to. They wanted to play. Jesse was in the front row with his little elbows on his knees, listening intently, like he wanted to know everything about Jesus's life. I mean, it was nourishment for my soul. And, we had the funeral there, and one of the things that I did at the funeral was get up and speak. And I didn't know if I could, but in the moment I did. And I said, this whole tragedy started with an angry thought in Adam Lanza's head. And I said, the incredible thing is, and because everything starts with a thought, right? Everything. The amazing thing to me, and I looked at him as like a little boy having an angry thought without the skills, tools, or nurturing environment to manage that thought. That thought grew more disappointment, betrayal, trauma, pain, into what later became the Sandy Hook tragedy. And I said, so everybody's been asking me, what can you do? I said, there is something you can do. You can start thinking about what you think about and actively change one angry thought into a loving thought every day. I said, by doing that, because we have control over our thoughts, by doing that, you will make yourself feel better, because loving thoughts feel good. That's going to be reflected in how you show up in your relationships. Angry, hateful, resentful thoughts feel bad. That will be reflected in your behavior. And that will ripple out, and that will positively impact other people. And through the ripple effect, together, we will make this a safer, more peaceful and loving world. And to my surprise, people actually went out and did that. and started emailing, texting me, calling me about a week later saying that one simple act had completely changed their lives. And so the Choose Love movement was created within a month because I thought, well, I'm onto something, something that people didn't know and need to know. And what if we could teach this to kids so they could be more aware of their thoughts, the thoughts that are leading them down one path or another? Start there.
So within 2 days of the tragedy at Sandy Hook, you
Within
got
a week.
within a
Within
week,
a week.
you gave
Yeah,
that
yeah.
birth.
He was buried 6 days later. He was buried 6 days later.
Even so, Scarlett, in a situation like this, people often don't know what to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
They struggle with the words, and often what comes through, and I would say especially women hear this a lot, you're so strong. There's such strength here. I'm wondering, how does that land for you? And I'm certain you've been told it multiple times through your life, because there's just such a the courage that comes through you is so plain and obvious. But for some, it can be received as, well, I had no choice, so it's kind of like doesn't feel good. Um, how does it feel for you hearing those words?
You talked about choice, and I think that's a very powerful thing to talk about right now, because that is our superpower as human beings. We have a choice, and I didn't realize that until following, the murder, and I'm sitting on my mom's couch and I'm looking at what I don't want, and I'm watching people react in anger and hatred. I don't want that either. And I think within the first few days, I was hoping somebody will come and just roll out a roadmap, and they'll go like, oh, okay, so you want to get to joy. All right, so you're going to have to, here's where you are now. So you actually will need to make a left here at gratitude and a right here at forget, I realized pretty early on, okay, because you know why? I mean, we went to, and this is not to knock therapists or psychiatrists or, counselors, whatever. I mean, I've utilized their services my whole life, and for my son too, but they were afraid. They were afraid. And I kind of joke and say my son, who was 12, he knew counselors and therapists, and he ate them for lunch, and so when we went back to them, I was kind of looking, I saw the fear in their eyes, and I thought, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work now, because we need to feel confident that somebody knows what they're doing. And actually, he had a really incredible experience with a counselor that came from Rwanda. And she arranged for orphan genocide survivors from Rwanda to Skype in with him. And they started telling them about their story. And it was horrendous. It was, like, you can't comparison grief, but they had witnessed their entire families being murdered, and they showed us the wounds that were still kind of open, and this was years and years later, and they told us how they moved through it. And it was with, obviously, courage. They talked about the gratitude that they had when they finally got to safety, and the Red Cross was feeding them, and the care that they had. They talked about forgiveness. They said, we realized at one point, if we didn't forgive, we would go down the same path of anger and rage and murder as the killers, they called them. So we realized we had to forgive. And then their version of compassion was sharing their story with us and helping us to learn from it. And really, it was JT that was just, completely transformed by that, because all of a sudden somebody who had credibility was telling him, you're going to be okay. We heard about your brother. You're going to be okay. Here's our story. And so JT, after that experience, gets up and starts an organization called Newtown Helps Rwanda. He's 12. He does it by himself, sells bands, the little rubber bands, and that you wear around your wrist at games for $2 a pop. And he starts donating the money. He sends it back to the Rwanda kids and sends them two of those people to university. He helps in the purchase of a sensory dog for some friends, and does other things too, builds self-sustaining fish ponds for former children's soldiers in Uganda. And it's in this service to others that he healed. It's in service to others that I heal. And so you're talking about strength, and I think I would say that is my understanding of God, my creator, and how close he is, and also Jesus. That is strength. But also my new understanding, which I didn't know before, that we're here to serve. Mm. And when we do, all the nurturing, healing love that we give out comes back to us. Who knew that? And it's true. I mean, I'm living proof, and so is JT. Can you imagine a world, as you said before, that understood and practiced these 4 character values? I mean, and they're all skills. They can all be taught, practiced, strengthened. Think about just a world that understood the power of forgiveness. It's not like there wouldn't be conflict. There would. We're human. But there would be no wars. There would be no, ongoing conflict, because we would forgive. Yeah. It's possible. It's possible, because you can learn this, you can practice it, and you can get to the point, you can rewire your brain through neuroplasticity to love, and from fear. We're kind of, I looked into this, and we teach this too. We are sort of wired for defense and even attack, and it's just natural. It's what we do. It's why a lot of people, when something like that happens, they do move towards revenge, and revenge can be addictive. It sparks the same channels in our brain as addiction. Mm. But the only way out of that, the only way to take your personal power back, is forgiveness. And here's the beautiful thing. It's a choice. You're talking about strength. And yeah, I have gotten strength through my choices, but I chose carefully. Mm-hmm. And I chose with my son in mind to be a role model for him. But just that understanding, for everybody that's listening, that you are a role model for someone, can help you rise to the occasion and work towards becoming the best version of yourself. And I feel like that's why we're here. Yeah. We're here to continue to try to do that. I mean, and we gauge our progress not by looking how far we have come walking into the sunset, but by turning around and saying, okay, I've come pretty far. Every night, if I put my head on the pillow and I've learned something, I've had a good day.
Yes. Oh, like, you're speaking my language, Scarlett. I love this so much, because it's just, I'm so with you on this is what the world needs. And, as we come to a close, I've got 3 more questions for you. One, I'm just finding it so interesting, this sort of thread underneath our discussion around a couple of times you've mentioned just feeling like the person who was sent or is meant to be there to hold the space for you and support you, just this sense of like, I don't trust this guidance, or this isn't the right guidance for me. And just how important it is for us to discern when we're in such a vulnerable place of processing our pain. We can very easily be led down a particular path. And I find it so amazing that you were able to hold true to what you felt was right for you, because I certainly know many people have experiences where they kind of question themselves and they go, oh, well, okay, maybe I should just do it this way. And the credibility piece you mentioned, traditionally we would see credibility as diplomas and university studies, and you're speaking to credibility from lived experience and people who
Absolutely.
have lived as the role model that you would prefer to model, or that JT would prefer to model. And I just find that so, yeah, it really speaks to me too.
And don't think that there was not pressure for me not to forgive. There
Yeah.
was. I mean, it made people angry. They didn't understand it. There are things we forgive and things we don't, and this is one that we don't, and I understood their not understanding. And I understood that they weren't ready, because we all have our own timeline, and that's okay. And I didn't judge them for it. I did know, though, if they understood what forgiveness gives you, if they understood the benefits, they would want that.
Mm, beautiful. And
Yeah.
Scarlett, I'm wondering what still gives you hope in the world, especially as we watch our world and we may be seeing more tensions and conflicts in 2026 as we have this conversation. And we may feel we could tell a story that things are going backwards in some ways and that the world is headed for, there's all kinds of those sort of stories out. It's very easy to get pulled into as well. What still gives you hope in this movement and this message that you have in your heart?
What gives me hope is being in classrooms and watching this being taught. We have a no cost infant, toddler through 12th grade program that teaches everything that I've been talking about. And I get tremendous hope being in classrooms. It was the Robb Elementary shooting in Uvalde that happened. It was a decade after Sandy Hook, and it was like a carbon copy, right? It was really hard because it's like, have we made any progress at all? And the day after, I was set to go to a high school in New Hampshire and present. So they had news cameras waiting in the parking lot for me after I finished that presentation. And they said something similar, like, you just must be so devastated. You must be without hope now. What are you feeling? And I said, I just came from a high school and 1,600 kids gave me a choose love wave. And they invited me, not their teachers, but the kids invited me because they wanted to learn about the Choose Love movement. So I have incredible hope. I could not be more hopeful. And I think it's really important. And you can have hope by practicing it and staying in that mind frame with having the courage to be grateful, forgiving, and compassion.
Yes, yes, and resisting the temptation to go down that path. It's like life wants to tempt you all the time to go negative, to kind of lose hope, and
You know what? It does me too. It does me too. I mean, I'm not immune to it. I'm walking shoulder to shoulder with everybody else. My mind does that as well. It wants to pull in negative memories of when I made mistakes as a mom and also and just to torture me. And I just say, no. I even hold up my hand. Nope. That is not productive. That lives only in my head. And I'm going to replace that with a happy memory because I have many more of those. Why would I do that to myself? Absolutely not. And I think we really need to just take control. Our mind doesn't control us. We control our mind.
oh, such a powerful message to leave us with. Scarlett, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute honor to have this conversation. You are such a light in the world, and we need it. And your light is glowing and infecting others with it in the best possible way. My last question for you is those who have really resonated with your story, how could they not? Where can we find you? How can we get your books? How can we be involved and stay connected with the Choose Love movement?
Please, because we're spreading this by word of mouth. So we need help in spreading this. You can find us on social media. We have a website, chooselovemovement.org. All if you register, you can have access to all of our curriculum. Take it to schools. It's the number one most overlooked aspect of school safety. That is addressing the grievance end of the pathway to violence. So it's so important. These are essential life skills that employers are looking for, that, lead to thriving in life. And so go to our website and download the program, tell people about it, share our social media posts, do all of that, talk. I've spread this by talking, and you see that I can talk. But please, and we have ambassadors too. If you feel a calling to do even more, you can become a Choose Love ambassador. And we meet once a month, and people have incredible ideas on how to spread the message. We're in prisons, we're in halfway houses and corporations. I mean, we're just kind of like everywhere that a human being is. And so I welcome you. I need help.
Beautiful. Well, I will be spreading this far and wide, Scarlett. And once again, all that information is in the show notes for anyone who would like to find it. Thank you so, so much for your service, for just being you and being such a wonderful role model for this world. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Georgie.